Imagine this. A foggy London evening, 1937. The world's greatest detective, Hercule Poirot, sits in a dimly lit study, his iconic mustache twitching as he leans forward toward a wide-eyed journalist. "You wish to know my secrets?" he whispers, his Belgian accent thick with intrigue. "The cases that tested my little grey cells to their limits. Ah, but where to begin? With a poisoned chalice in a wartime manor where family bonds shatter like glass, or a locked room stabbing in a sleepy village, hiding a confession so twisted it defies belief." Chapter 1. The Poisoned Chalice at Styles Court. The summer of 1916 hung heavy over the English countryside, a veil of wartime austerity pierced only by the occasional rumble of distant artillery echoing from across the Channel. I, Arthur Hastings, a wounded captain invalided home from the front, found myself recuperating in the quaint village of Styles St. Mary, at the invitation of my old friend John Cavendish. His family estate, Styles Court, was a sprawling Tudor manor house, its ivor-clad walls whispering secrets of generations past. Little did I know that my stay would thrust me into the orbit of a peculiar Belgian refugee whose mind was sharper than any bayonet I'd faced in the trenches. John's stepmother, Emily Inglethorpe, ruled the household with an iron fist wrapped in velvet gloves. A widow in her late 50s, she had married John's father late in life and inherited the bulk of his fortune upon his death. Emily was a philanthropist, by day funding Belgian refugees like the one who would soon append our lives. But at night she brooded over her ledgers, her sharp eyes missing nothing. Her recent remarriage to Alfred Inglethorpe, a brooding man 20 years her junior, with a waxed moustache and a penchant for exotic poisons from his travels in the Orient, had set tongues wagging in the village. "Alfred's a charmer, Hastings," John confided as we strolled the manicured gardens one afternoon, the scent of roses clashing with the acrid tang of gunpowder in my memory. "But there's something off about him. Mother's will favours him now, and Evelyn, my brother's wife, swears he's got a secret stash of tonics that could fell an elephant." Evelyn Cavendish, a fiery redhead with a laugh like shattering glass, was the wild card in the family. Married to John's younger brother, Lawrence, a dreamy poet who spent his days scribbling verses about lost empires, she harboured ambitions of her own. "Emily treats us like paupers," she hissed during tea one day, her emerald brooch glinting like a serpent's eye. "If not for her charity balls, we'd be out on the street. Mark my words, that chalice she sips from every evening, it's her undoing waiting to happen." The chalice in question was an antique silver goblet, engraved with swirling vines, from which Emily drank her nightly cocoa. It was a ritual as steadfast as the village church bells. That fateful evening, the household gathered in the drawing room after dinner. The air was thick with tension. War rationing had strained even the wealthy, and arguments over Emily's latest donation to the refugees simmered like a pot about to boil over. "Darling, you mustn't overexert yourself," Alfred Coudet, handing her the chalice with a flourish. His voice was smooth as oil, but I caught a flicker in his eyes, something predatory. Emily waved him off. "Nonsense, Alfred. These Belgians need our help. Speaking of which, I've invited one to stay Monsieur Hercule Poirot. He arrives tomorrow. A detective, they say, with a mind like a steel trap." Lawrence snorted from his corner, his ink-stained fingers clutching a notebook. "A detective? What? Are we expecting a crime wave in Styles?" Evelyn's laughter rang out, brittle and forced. "With the way you moon over those poems, Lawrence, one might think you're plotting something yourself." John shot me a weary glance. But before he could intervene, Emily took a sip from the chalice. Her face contorted almost immediately, eyes widening, hands clutching at her throat. "Poison," she gasped, the goblet clattering to the floor, cocoa spilling like dark blood across the Persian rug. Chaos erupted. Alfred lunged forward, feigning horror. "Emily, my love." Evelyn screamed, knocking over a vase in her haste. Lawrence froze, his pen dropping like a guilty verdict. John barked orders for the doctor, but by the time Dr. Bauer arrived from the village, Emily Inglethorpe was dead, her body arched in the rigid pose of strychnine poisoning. The police arrived at dawn. Inspector Japper, burly man with a nonsense mustache, leading the charge. "Classic case," he muttered, examining the chalice. "Strychnine crystals dissolved in the cocoa. Who prepared it?" Accusations flew like shrapnel. Alfred pointed at Evelyn, claiming she'd argued with Emily over money that afternoon. She threatened, "To end this farce, I heard it myself." Evelyn retorted that Alfred had been seen purchasing rat poison in the village chemist's shop, disguised as tonic for his nerves. Lawrence admitted to handling the chalice earlier, polishing it for a family heirloom display, but swore innocence. John, ever the stoic, vouched for everyone, but his alibi was shaky. He'd been in the stables alone. As the household reeled, a knock echoed through the manor. There stood Hercule Poirot, a diminutive man with an egg-shaped head, impeccable mustaches waxed to perfection, and eyes that sparkled like polished emeralds. "Bonjour, mes amis," he said, bowing slightly. "I am Hercule Poirot, at Madame Inglethorpe's invitation, but I see tragedy has preceded me." Inspector Japp eyed him skeptically. "A Belgian detective. This is an English matter, sir." Poirot smiled enigmatically. "Ah, but crime knows no borders, Inspector. Permit me to assist. My little grey cells, they itch for a puzzle." Reluctantly, Japp agreed, and Poirot set to work with the precision of a watchmaker. He inspected the chalice first, sniffing the residue. "Strychnine, oui. But not just any. This has a faint aroma of anise from the Orient." "Monsieur Inglethorpe, you have travelled there, Nan." Alfred paled. "Coincidence? I collect artifacts, nothing more." Poirot nodded, then turned to the garden, where I followed him. "Captain Hastings," he said, his voice a melodic purr, "you are observant, like a soldier scouting terrain. Tell me, what do you see?" I scanned the flower beds. Roses, hedges, nothing amiss. Precise, but look closer. The soil here is disturbed, as if someone buried something hastily. He knelt, digging with a silver letter opener, and unearthed a small vial labelled strychnine for vermin. Evelyn's vial, or so it seemed, but Poirot pocketed it without a word, his mustache twitching. "We must reconstruct the evening. Gather everyone. Si vous plot." In the drawing-room, Poirot paced like a conductor before an orchestra. Madame Inglethorpe drank from the chalice every night. But last night, it was tainted. Who had opportunity? Lawrence shifted uncomfortably. I polished it, but left it on the sideboard. Evelyn interjected, and Alfred filled it with cocoa, he always does. Alfred protested, but John stirred in the sugar. John frowned. "Only because you asked me to, Alfred. Said your hands were shaking from the war news." Poirot's eyes gleamed. "Ah, the sugar. Inspector, test the sugar bowl." Japp did, and his face fell. "Clean, no poison." "Exactamen," Poirot said. The poison was not in the cocoa or sugar. It was in the chalice itself, coated on the inside, perhaps with a slow-dissolving resin that activates with heat. We gasped, but how? Poirot continued. Someone applied it earlier, knowing Madame would drink that night. But who? He turned to Lawrence. Monsieur Cavendish, your poems, they speak of bitter vines entwining hearts. You resent your stepmother's control over the family fortune, Nan. And you polished the chalice. Lawrence stammered. I did, but only with a cloth. Poirot held up a handkerchief from Lawrence's pocket. This cloth stained with resin traces. You coated the chalice during polishing. The room erupted. Lawrence bolted for the door, but Jap tackled him. Why? Evelyn cried, tears streaming. Poirot explained calmly. Motive, greed, and desperation. Lawrence discovered Emily's new will, cutting him out entirely in favor of Alfred. But he didn't know Alfred was a fraud, his Oriental travels a lie. He's a conman from London, using poisons for stage magic shows. Lawrence bought the strychnine, disguised it as rat poison, and applied it subtly, hoping to frame Alfred. Lawrence confessed in a torrent. She was suffocating us. The war took everything, and she hoarded it all. I thought if she died, we'd inherit fairly. But Alfred, he manipulated her will. Alfred lunged, but Poirot sidestepped neatly. Non, monsieur. You are complicit, too, blackmailing Lawrence over his gambling debts, forcing him to act. But the little grey cells see all. Jap arrested both, the cuffs clicking like final punctuation. As the police carted them away, Poirot turned to me with a wink. Captain Hastings, you have a keen eye. Perhaps we shall collaborate again. Crime, it seems, follows me like a faithful hound. The household breathed relief. John inherited Styles, vowing to honor Emily's refugee work. Evelyn, shaken, burned. Lawrence's poems in the fireplace, their ashes mingling with the cocoa stains. As night fell, I watched Poirot from my window, strolling the gardens under the stars. His triumph at Styles was completer poisoned, chalice emptied, justice served. Yet in his posture I sensed a restlessness, as if this victory merely whetted his appetite for greater enigmas lurking in the shadows of quieter villages. Chapter 2. The whispered confession in King's Abatha mist clung to the cobblestones of King's Abbot like a shroud, muffling the clatter of horse-drawn carts and the distant whistle of the morning train. It was the autumn of 1920, and I, Arthur Hastings, had settled into the sleepy rhythm of this English village, a far cry from the battlefields of my past. My encounter with Hercule Poirot at Styles Court 4 years prior had left an indelible mark, and when I heard he'd taken up residence in a modest cottage nearby, I felt a thrill akin to spotting an old comrade in a crowd. Little did I know that King's Abbot, with its quaint cottages and gossip-laden tea-rooms, was about to become the stage for Poirot's next triumph case, so cunning it would redefine deception itself. Roger Ackroyd, the village's wealthiest resident, was a widower whose fortunes stemmed from a factory producing precision gears for the war effort. His sprawling manor, Fernley Park, stood at the edge of town, its gables looming like silent sentinels. Ackroyd was a man of gruff charm, his laughter booming over Sunday roasts, but recent whispers painted a darker picture. He'd been entangled in a scandal involving a Mrs. Ferrers, a widow who'd died suddenly of an overdose, leaving rumours of blackmail and forbidden love in her wake. I joined Poirot for tea at his cottage, where his meticulously arranged teaspoons and immaculate moustache contrasted with the villager's rustic charm. Mon ami, he said, his green eyes glinting, you arrive at a curious moment. King's Abbot hums with secrets, like bees in a hive. Tell me, what do you know of Monsieur Ackroyd? Only that he's the village's backbone, I replied. Stirring my tea, generous, but stern. This talk he was close to Mrs. Ferrers, too close, some say. Poirot nodded, his fingers steepled. And now, I hear, he dines with guests tonight. A most intriguing assembly. That evening, Ackroyd's dining room buzzed with tension. The guests included his niece, Flora, a vivacious blonde with dreams of the stage; Dr. James Shepherd, the village physician with a nervous tic and a penchant for late-night walks; Major Blunt, a retired soldier whose clipped speech hid a sharp mind; and Mrs. Russell, Ackroyd's housekeeper, whose austere demeanour masked a past she refused to discuss. I'd been invited as Poirot's guest, my role as his unofficial aide cemented by our Styles adventure. Dinner was a strained affair. Ackroyd, red-faced from port, hinted at a revelation. "I've learned something troubling," he said, his voice low. "Someone close to me has been lying about money, about loyalty. I'll deal with it tomorrow." Flora paled, her fork clattering. "Uncle, please, not here." Dr. Shepherd coughed, adjusting his spectacles. "Perhaps discretion is wiser, Roger." Mrs. Russell's lips tightened, and Blunt merely grunted, carving his roast with military precision. Poirot, silent, observed like a hawk circling prey. After dinner, Ackroyd retreated to his study, locking the door. The rest of us lingered in the parlour, the air thick with unease. At precisely 9:50 p.m., a cry echoed from the study, followed by a thud. Flora screamed, and we rushed to the door, only to find it bolted. Blunt and I forced it open, revealing Ackroyd slumped in his armchair, a dagger plunged into his neck, blood pooling on the oak floor. A letter, half opened on his desk, bore Mrs. Ferrers' handwriting. The village constable summoned Inspector Davis, a wiry man with a sceptical squint. "Murder, plain as day," he declared. "Door locked from the inside, window latched. Someone in this house did it." Poirot, arriving moments later, surveyed the scene with a dancer's grace. "None, Inspector. The locked door is not a barrier, is a clue. Observe the window latch scratched, as if tampered with from outside, yet the dust on the sill is undisturbed. A contradiction, Nest C.P.A. Davis scoffed. "You're saying it's impossible." "I say it is deliberate," Poirot countered, his moustache twitching. "Captain Hastings, assist me. We must question the household." Flora, trembling, swore she'd been in the garden, dreaming of her stage debut. "I heard nothing until the cry," she insisted, her eyes darting to Blunt, who confirmed he'd seen her silhouette outside. Dr. Shepherd claimed he'd been in his surgery, preparing prescriptions, though his maid later admitted he'd left. Briefly around 9:30, Mrs. Russell said she was polishing silver in the pantry, her alibi unshakable but her hands trembling. Blunt, gruff as ever, had been smoking in the billiard room, alone. Poirot's questions were like darts, precise and piercing. "To Shepherd," he asked, "your sister, Mademoiselle Caroline Shea, is the village gossip, Did she ever speak of Mrs. Ferrers' secrets?" Shepherd bristled. "Caroline talks too much, but nothing specific." To Mrs. Russell, Poirot said, "You were once a nurse, were you not? Skilled with medicines, ... and perhaps their misuse." Her face froze. "I left that life long ago." Poirot's next move was to examine the letter on Ackroyd's desk. It was from Mrs. Ferrers, confessing she'd been blackmailed over a secret her husband's death years ago was no accident, but poison. "Someone knew," the letter read, "and bled me dry. I told Roger tonight." "This," Poirot murmured. is the heart of the matter. The blackmailer killed Ackroyd to silence him. Suspicion swirled. Flora stood to inherit Ackroyd's fortune, but her tears seemed genuine. Shepard's nervous tic worsened under scrutiny, and Blunt admitted to a financial dispute with Ackroyd over a failed investment. Mrs. Russell's past as a nurse raised eyebrows. Had she access to poisons like those that killed Mr. Ferrers? Poirot, undeterred, explored the grounds at dawn. Hastings observed the footprints near the study window to perfect, as if placed to mislead. He then found a scrap of fabric caught on a hedge, embroidered with a tiny C. Not Flora's, he mused. Her initials, RFA. Back at his cottage, Poirot assembled us all, his presence commanding the cramped parlour. Mies Amos, this murder is a masquerade. The locked door, the letter, they are props in a play. The killer wished us to believe Ackroyd was alone, betrayed by a secret from within. But the truth lies elsewhere. He turned to Dr. Shepard. You, monsieur, are the architect of this crime. The letter from Mrs. Ferrers, you wrote it, forging her hand to suggest blackmail and divert suspicion. You were not in your surgery, but in the study, stabbing Ackroyd after drugging his port to slow his reflexes. The window latch, you scratched it to suggest an intruder, but the dust betrayed you. Shepard laughed, a hollow sound. Preposterous. I'm a doctor, not a murderer. Poirot held up the fabric scrap. This C belongs to your sister, Caroline, whose shawl you borrowed to stage your alibi. You slipped out, entered the study via the French doors, and killed Ackroyd, locking them from inside to create the illusion of a sealed room. Your motive, greed. Ackroyd discovered you blackmailed Mrs. Ferrers, threatening to expose her. You silenced him before he could act. The room fell silent. Shepard's tic vanished, replaced by a cold glare. You can't prove it, but... I can, Poirot said, producing a dictaphone, a newfangled device Ackroyd had installed to record business notes. You didn't know it captured your whispered threat to Ackroyd. Confess, or you're next. The machine was hidden in the study's clock. Shepard collapsed, confessing in a broken whisper. He'd ruined me. I had no choice. As Davis led him away, Flora sobbed, and Blunt offered her a steady hand. Mrs. Russell vanished into the kitchen, her secrets safe for now. Poirot, sipping tea, turned to me. Hastings, the human heart is a labyrinth, but the little grey cells, they find the path. King's Abbot exhaled, its peace restored. Yet Poirot's eyes gleamed with a new hunger, as whispers of a killer who struck with alphabetical precision reached his ears, beckoning him toward a darker, more intricate puzzle. Chapter 3. The Alphabetical Trail of Ter Arthur. Winter winds of 1933 howled through the streets of London like restless spirits, carrying the chill of unsolved mysteries. I, Arthur Hastings, had returned from a stint in Argentina, my ranching. Dreams dashed by economic woes, only to find Hercule Poirot ensconced in a sleek Whitehaven Mansions apartment. His reputation burnished brighter than ever after the Ackroyd affair. The village whispers had given way to national headlines, and Poirot, ever the showman, revelled in his growing legend. But as I sipped cognac by his roaring fire, a letter arrived that would plunge us into a nightmare of calculated chaos. A killer who toyed with order as if it were a deadly game. The envelope was pristine, postmarked from Andover, bearing no return address. Poirot slit it open with a pearl-handled knife, his moustache quivering. Mon ami, he murmured, passing it to me. The typed message was stark. Monsieur Poirot, the 21st, Alice Asher of Andover, will die. Then Betty Barnard of Bexhill. The alphabet marches on. Catch me if you can ABC. I laughed uneasily. A crank, surely. Some fool inspired by your fame. Poirot's eyes narrowed to slits. Nan Hastings. The precise font, the cheap paper, it smells of deliberation. We must warn the authorities. Inspector Japp, now at Scotland Yard, dismissed it as a hoax. We've got real crimes, Poirot. Bombs in Ireland, strikes in the mills. Can't chase phantoms. But on the 21st, news broke. Alice Asher, an elderly tobacco in Andover, found strangled in her shop. An ABC railway guide propped open beside her body. No robbery, no struggle, just a silk stocking around her neck, and the guide pointing to Andover. Poirot and I raced to the scene. The train clattering through fog-shrouded fields. Andover was a drab coastal town, its high street lined with shuttered shops. Mrs. Asher's store was cordoned off, locals gawking like crows at carrion. Inspector Crome, a young upstart with a clipboard and a sneer, greeted us. Foreign meddler yard sent you. Waste of time, this is a local thug's work. Poirot ignored the barb, kneeling by the body. Alice lay behind the counter, her face purpled, the ABC guide splayed to page 1. Observe, Hastings, the guide is new, unthumbed except for this page, and her nails clean, no fight. She knew her killer. Suspects emerged like shadows. Her nephew Franz, a shiftless gambler down on his luck, had argued with her over inheritance the day before. Auntie was stingy, he admitted, his hands fidgeting. But strangle her, I'd sooner bet on horses. Megan Barnard, a waitress from nearby Bexhill, visited often oddly, as they weren't related. Just friendly chats, she said, her eyes evasive. Alice mentioned a stranger asking for directions. Last week a man with a limp. Poirot's little grey cell's word, a limp, or a disguise. We must anticipate the next Betty Barnard in Bexhill. We alerted Bexhill police, but on the 25th, Betty, a flirtatious typist, was found on the beach, garroted with her own belt. Another ABC guide opened to Bexhill. Panic rippled through the press. Alphabet killer strikes again. In Bexhill, a seaside resort faded by the depression, Betty's body lay amid driftwood, waves lapping like accusatory tongues. Her fiancé, Donald Fraser, a mechanic with grease-stained hands, wept openly. We quarrelled last night. She danced with another bloke at the pavilion, but kill her, never. That bloke was Alexander Bonaparte Cust, a travelling salesman peddling stockings door-to-door. Nervous, with a perpetual twitch, he stammered, "I sell hosiery, yes. But I was in Churston that night, at a pub, Churston." The next letter arrived at Poirot's flat, taunting. Carmichael Clark of Churston next. ABC advances. Poirot assembled a task force, Japper Crome, and me in a smoky yard conference room. "This is no random lunatic," Poirot declared, pinning maps with alphabetical pins. "The killer chooses victims without connection, but the methods always intimate suggests personal rage masked as pattern." Sir Carmichael Clark, a retired industrialist in Churston, was guarded round the clock. His estate overlooked the Devon cliffs, gardens manicured like a general's uniform. "Bloody nonsense," he blustered, puffing a cigar. "I've enemies from the factories, but alphabet games, poppycock." His wife, Lady Clark, frail from illness, whispered to Poirot. "Carmichael's brother, Thora Grey, his secretary, is too close. Jealousy brews here." Thora, a stunning blonde with calculating eyes, denied it. "I'm just efficient. Sir Carmichael dictates letters late at night, nothing more. On the predicted date, despite patrols, Sir Carmichael was found in his library, throat crushed by a lead pipe, ABC guide on his desk, turned to Churston. The pipe, from his own collection. Outrage boiled. The press dubbed it the ABC murders, and letters poured in copycats, tips, threats. Poirot, pacing his flat, connected dots. Hastings, the victims, Asher, alone and poor. Barnard, vivacious, Clark, wealthy. No link but the alphabet, yet each had a visitor, salesman, perhaps. Cust again. We tracked him to a dingy London boarding house. He bolted at our approach, but Jap collared him. In his room, typewriter matching the letters, stockings like the murder weapon, and a blood-stained knife. It looks to Pat, I said. Poirot. Agreed. Cust is epileptic. Mon amiable Couts. Headaches. He sells for a firm that routes him to each town on the murder dates. But the knife-planted interrogation revealed Cust's fragility. I don't remember, he sobbed. Gaps in my mind. The headaches come, and I wake elsewhere. Another letter. Doncaster 4D, but you'll never stop ABC. Doncaster races teemed with crowds, a perfect killing ground. Poirot rallied us to the Dragon Hotel, where a film producer named Downs was staying, his name starting with D. But as we guarded Downs, a scream echoed from the cinema next door. George Ulsfield, an usher, throttled in the projection room. ABC guide at his feet. E, not D. Jap exclaimed. The pattern broke. Poirot's eyes sparkled. None the killer adapts. Elsfield was incidental. The real target was missed. We formed a special legion, survivors and suspects. Franz Asher, Donald Fraser, Megan Barnard, Betty's sister, sharp-tongued and observant, Thora Gray, and Lady Clark. In Poirot's flat, tensions simmered. Someone here knows more. Poirot probed. Megan snapped. Cust's guilty-ended. But Donald fidgeted. I saw Cust in Bexhill, arguing with Betty. Thora added, he tried selling me stockings in Fellow, Poirot smiled. Pushy or framed. The typewriter in his room used for the letters. Yes, but fingerprints. Only his. To clean. The final letter, E next, or leap to F. ABC laughs. But Poirot struck. In a dramatic gathering at Whitehaven, he unveiled the truth. Madame, et messieurs, the ABC killer is not Custy, is the puppet. The real murderer is among us. Franklin Clark, Sir Carmichael's brother. Franklin, hitherto unmentioned, had joined the Legion, quietly a suave adventurer with a taste for puzzles. He paled, absurd. Poirot paced. You orchestrated this symphony of death to kill your brother, inheriting his fortune, the alphabet, a smokescreen. Asher and Barnard random, victims to establish the serial pattern, making Carmichael's murder seem part of it. You planted clues. On Cust, your unwitting salesman, whose roots you knew from investing in his firm. The headaches, you drugged him during friendly encounters, creating blackouts. Evidence mounted. Franklin's typewriter ribbon matched faintly. A witness saw him by ABC guides in bulk. His alibi for Bexhill cracked under scrutiny. He'd motored there disguised. Why, Lady Clark gasped. Greed, Poirot said. Carmichael cut you from his will, favouring Thora. You framed Cust, a harmless drifter, to take the fall. Franklin snarled, lunging, but Jap restrained him. Clever, Belgian, he spat. But you'd never have caught me without those letters. Exactement, Poirot replied. Your ego demanded the taunt. The little grey cells, they hear the unsaid. Cust was cleared, a victim himself. The legion dispersed. Megan to rebuild, Donald to mourn, Thora to new horizons. England breathed easy, the alphabetical terror quelled. As snow-blanketed London, Poirot gazed from his window. Hastings, order triumphs over chaos. Yet the human soul craves vengeance in grandeur, Uranus perhaps on rails, speeding through the night. His satisfaction was profound, the case closed like a well-thumbed guide. But in his gaze I glimpsed anticipation for tempests brewing on distant, luxurious tracks. Chapter 4. Vengeance aboard the Orient Express. The crisp, Balkan air of 1934 carried the promise of adventure as the Simplon Orient Express thundered out of Istanbul, its polished cars gleaming like jewels against the rugged landscape. I, Arthur Hastings, had joined Hercule Poirot on this leg of his journey homeward from a minor case in Syria, eager for the luxury of velvet seats and gourmet cuisine after the alphabetical mayhem that had gripped England the previous year. Poirot, ever immaculate in his tailored suit, settled into our compartment with a sigh of contentment. "Ah, mon ami," he said, twirling his moustache, "the Orient Expresser, symphony of elegance and efficiency. What could disturb such harmony? Fate, it seemed, had other plans." The train was unusually crowded for the off-season, every berth occupied by an assortment of travellers whose stories intertwined like the tracks beneath us. In the dining car that first evening, under crystal chandeliers, swaying gently, we dined amid a cosmopolitan chorus. There was the boisterous American, Samuel Ratchet, a tycoon with a scarred face and a habit of barking orders at his secretary. Hector McQueen, a nervous young man with ink-smudged cuffs. Ratchet's eyes darted suspiciously, as if shadows pursued him. Beside them sat Princess Dragomirov, a Russian exile draped in furs and pearls. Her imperious gaze softened only when conversing with her German maid, Hildegard Schmidt, a sturdy woman with calloused hands. Colonel Arbuthnot, a stern British officer fresh from India, shared cigars with Pierre Michel, the French conductor whose uniform was as spotless as his record. Mary Debenham, an English governess with a poised demeanour, chatted animatedly with Greta Olsen, a Swedish missionary whose Bible clutched like a shield. Further along, the Italian chauffeur Antonio Foscarelli gesticulated wildly to Cyrus Hardman, a brash New York detective posing as a tape salesman, while the Hungarian Count and Countess Andrini, he a diplomat with a fencing scar, she a former actress with haunted eyes, whispered in hushed tones. Dr. Constantine, a Greek physician with a philosophical bent, rounded out the group, his laughter echoing over foie gras. Poirot observed them all with keen interest. Hastings, each passenger is a locked box. But see Ratchet, he fears the key turning. Indeed, Ratchet approached Poirot after dinner, his voice a gravelly whisper in the corridor. "Monsieur Poirot, I need your services. Someone's threatening. Meal letters, shadows in the night. I'll pay handsomely to guard my life." Poirot's response was cool. "Monsieur, I do not protect those whose auras reek of malice. Your face, it tells tales of cruelty. Nan, I decline." Ratchet's scar twisted. "In anger, you'll regret that, Belgian." That night, as the train sliced through the Yugoslavian mountains, a blizzard descended, blanketing the world in white fury. We halted in a drift-stoked pass, engines silenced, the cars an isolated island in the storm. Sleep came fitfully, disturbed by creaks and murmurs. At dawn, Michel pounded on doors. Monsieur Ratchet, he does not respond. We forced the compartment door. Ratchet lay in his berth, pajamas blood-soaked, 12 stab wounds marring his chests, some shallow, some deep, as if inflicted by varying hands. His watch, stopped at 1:15 a.m., clutched in his fist. A handkerchief embroidered with an H lay nearby, and a pipe cleaner twisted on the floor. The window was ajar, snow piled on the sill, but footprints outside vanished in the drifts.m book. The Belgian director of the Whodunit company and an old friend of Poirot's wrung his hands at catastrophe. The police are days away in this. Snow, Poirot, you must investigate for the honor of the line. Poirot agreed, his little grey cells igniting, with Dr. Constantine confirming the wounds were made between midnight and 2 a.m. And the body still warm, we sealed the train, no one could escape. Interrogations began in the dining car, transformed into an impromptu courtroom, McQueen admitted. Ratchet was Cassetti, the infamous kidnapper who years ago abducted and murdered little Daisy Armstrong, a child of American royalty, despite a ransom paid. The tragedy shattered the Armstrong family. The mother died in premature labor, the father suicidal, the maid wrongly accused and dead by her own hand. Ratchet fled justice, McQueen said, his voice trembling. I worked for him too. Watch him, perhaps. Princess Dragomirov claimed ignorance, but her ring bore the Armstrong crest, a gift from a dear friend, Sonia Armstrong, Daisy's mother, she confessed reluctantly. We were close in Paris exile. Colonel Arbuthnot, rigid as a bayonet, admitted, knowing the Armstrongs from colonial days. Daisy was like a niece. Cassetti deserved worse. Mary Debenham, composed, revealed she'd been Daisy's governess. I left for England after, but the pain lingers. Greta Olson wept. I nursed Mrs. Armstrong through her grief until it claimed her. Hildegard Schmidt, the maid, stuttered that she'd cooked for the household. Antonio Foscarelli, the chauffeur, growled, I drove them that fateful day. Cyrus Hardman confessed his detective guise. I loved the Armstrong ma jumped to her death because of Cassetti. I'm here for vengeance. The Andronese, the Countess, was Helena Goldenberg, Daisy's aunt. Her acting career abandoned in sorrow. The Count, her protector, Dr. Constantine, had treated the family post-tragedy. Pierre Michel's sister was the doomed maid, Suzanne. Even Bouc puzzled over the web, all connected to Armstrong. Impossible coincidence. Poirot paced, piecing the mosaic. Alibis intertwined. Drugged coffee left all drowsy, courtesy of the Countess's Veronal. The watch stopped at 1:15's mashed deliberately. The H handkerchief, Helena's, but she used E for Alina, her stage name. A burnt note in Ratchet's ashtray read, Remember, Daisy, the wounds, right-handed and left, strong and weak, Hastings. Poirot said privately, 2 solutions emerge. 1, an outsider boarded, stabbed, fled into snow, but footprints absent. 2, an inside job, but 12 wounds by 1. Nan, we searched compartments. In Arbuthnot's, a pipe cleaner matching the clue. In the princess's, a conductor's uniform. In Hardman's, a revolver. Confrontations escalated. Michel admitted overhearing Ratchet's pleas. He begged for mercy like Suzanne did in jail. Poirot assembled everyone at midnight, the train still, snowbound, candles flickering like accusatory eyes. Mesdames et messieurs, the truth is extraordinary. Ratchet was not killed by 1, but by all of you, a jury of 12, delivering justice where law failed. Gasps rippled. Poirot elaborated. Each stab a symbolic wound for Daisy's suffering. The alibis, a chain each, covering the next. Michelle drugged the coffee. Debenham stopped the watch. Arbuthnot left the pipe cleaner as misdirection. The handkerchief. A red herring from Hildegard, H for her name. Princess Dragomirov nodded regally. We planned it meticulously. Cassetti escaped American justice. We became his executioners. Hardman added, I posed as his protector to get close, but we all boarded knowing this route, this train. Poirot's voice softened. The little grey cells saw the connections, the Armstrong tragedy binding you like threads in a tapestry. No single motive, but collective retribution. Book paled. But Poirot, what now? Murder is murder. Poirot pondered, his moral compass wavering. In law, yes, but in justice. The police will hear of an intruder who vanished in the snow. The wounds varied to confuse. We shall report thus. Relief washed over the group. The Countess wept. Thank you, monsieur. Daisy's ghost can rest. As the blizzard cleared and the train chugged onward, Poirot confided in me. Hastings, sometimes the heart overrules the head. Vengeance blurs lines, but here it heals. The Orient. Express rolled into calmer climes, its secret buried like tracks in melting snow. Poirot, philosophically sated, gazed toward the Mediterranean, where Egyptian suns promised intrigues of passion and pyramids, far from snowbound reckonings. Chapter 5. Shadows on the Nile's crimson waters. The relentless sun of February 1937 baked the decks of the SS Karnak as it glided along the Nile's emerald ribbon, ancient temples blurring into mirages on the horizon. I, Arthur Hastings, had escaped England's dreary winters for this Egyptian idol at Hercule Poirot's insistence. His telegram proclaiming, "Join me, Monomia pyramids, and puzzles await." Fresh from the moral quandaries of the Orient Express, Poirot sought respite amid Pharaoh's ghosts, but fate, that capricious scribe, had scripted otherwise. The Karnak, a floating palace of polished teak and brass, carried a cargo of secrets, heavier than any cargo of spices from the bazaars. Our fellow passengers formed a mosaic of intrigue. At the center shimmered Lynette Doyle, the golden-haired heiress whose American fortune could rival Cleopatra's. Recently wed to the dashing Simon Doyle, a land agent with a boyish grin and athletic build, she exuded triumph. Egypt's our honeymoon. Playground, she confided during a sunset cocktail, her diamond necklace catching the light like captured stars. Simon, ever attentive, squeezed her hand, but his eyes flicked nervously to the shadows. Hovering like a persistent mirage was Jacqueline de Belafort, Simon's former fiancée, a petite brunette with fiery spirit and a pearl-handled revolver. She claimed was for desert jackals. Lynette stole him. She whispered to me one evening on the promenade deck, her voice laced with venom. But I'll toast their happiness from afar. Colonel Race, a steely-eyed intelligence officer with a clipped moustache, joined us often, his tales of espionage blending with the river's murmurs. "Trouble brews here," he muttered to Poirot, nodding at the Doyles. "That girl's got murder in her gaze." Tim Allerton, a languid young man with artistic pretensions, sketched the landscapes. Alongside his mother, the formidable Mrs. Allerton, whose knitting needles clicked like accusatory metronomes. Rosalie Otterbourne, a sullen beauty overshadowed by her mother Salome, a flamboyant novelist in turbans and beads, added literary flair. My next book, Salome boasted over dinner, will expose the hypocrisies of the idol rich like certain heiresses aboard. Andrew Pennington, Linnet's American trustee, with a slick smile and ledger under his arm, fretted over investments. "Linnet's to trusting," he said, adjusting his spectacles. "Cornelia Robson, a cheerful spinster travelling with her cousin. Miss Van Schuyler, an imperious dowager reliant on her nurse, Miss Bowers, completed the ensemble. Ferguson, a outspoken socialist in rumpled linen, railed against wealth, his barbs, aimed at Linnet Poirot, lounging in a wicker chair with a tisane, observed the undercurrents. Hastings, the Nile flows calmly, but crocodiles lurk beneath. See how Mademoiselle de Belafort circles the Doyles like a falcon eyeing prey. Tension peaked during an excursion to Abu Simbel, where colossal statues glowered under the moon. Jacqueline confronted Simon in the temple shadows. "You promised me forever," she hissed, her revolver glinting. "Now you're her lapdog." Simon pushed her away. "It's over, Jackie." "Linnet's my life now." Linnet, overhearing, laughed coldly. "Darling, ignore the hysteric. She's harmless, aren't you, Jackie?" Back aboard, the air crackled. That night, after a raucous dance in the Saloon Salome, reciting dramatic passages from her latest manuscript, Ferguson debating politics with race, the ship settled into silence. But at midnight, a shot rang out from Linnet's cabin. We burst in. Linnet lay on her berth, a bullet hole in her temple, pearl earrings askew, a scrawled J in blood on the wall. Her jewel case lay open, empty. Simon, bandaged from an earlier accident, Jackie had shot him in the leg during a heated argument, hobbled in, collapsing in grief. Who could do this? She was everything. Poirot took command, his demeanor shifting from vacationer to virtuoso. With Race's assistance, we secured the scene. Dr. Bessner, a portly Austrian physician aboard, confirmed death by a single shot from a small caliber pistol. Jackie's found tossed overboard. But Jackie had an ironclad alibi, sedated in her cabin. After the leg shooting incident, guarded by Miss Bowers. "Impossible," Race growled. "She's the obvious suspect, yet untouchable." Poirot examined the cabin meticulously. "Observe Hastings the J in blood. Too theatrical, and Linnet's nails are clean, no struggle. The pearls, missing, but her ring remains. A diversion." Interviews unfolded in the observation lounge, the Nile's banks slipping by like forgotten scrolls. Simon, pale and limping, swore. He'd been in the saloon, nursing his wound with whiskey. Jackie fired at me in rage, but missed my vitals. Then she collapsed, and Bowers took her away. Jacqueline, roused from her stupor, wept dramatically. "I hated her, yes, but murder. I'd rather see them suffer alive." Pennington admitted arguing with Linnet over shady investments. "She accused me of embezzlement, but kill her. Absurd, I'm ruined without her signature." Salome Otterbourne claimed to have seen a shadowy figure near Linnet's cabin. "Inspiration for my novel. A veiled woman, perhaps." Rosalie, her daughter, rolled her eyes. "Mother exaggerates everything." Tim Allerton fidgeted, his sketches including one of Linnetu intimate. Mrs. Allerton defended him. "My boy's harmless." Cornelia confessed a crush on Simon, but Miss Van Schuyler dismissed it. Ferguson ranted, "Good riddance to bourgeois excess." As Poirot pondered, another horror. Louise Bourget, Linnet's French maid, found stabbed in her cabin, clutching a scrap of banknote. "She saw something," Poirot murmured. "Blackmail." Then Chaos Salome Otterbourne, bursting into the lounge, proclaimed, "I know the killer. I saw a shot silenced her forever, fired from the doorway." Her body slumped, a silenced pistol vanishing into the crowd. The ship anchored at a remote bend. Police summoned by wireless, but Poirot pressed on. 3 deaths, Mies, Amos, linked by greed and passion. He gathered us at dusk on the upper deck, stars mirroring the Nile's ripples. The little grey cells have unravelled this tapestry of deceit. Lynette Doyle's murder was not jealousy alone, but a conspiracy of love and avarice. Gasps echoed. Poirot pointed to Simon. You, Monsieur Doyle, are the architect. Your wound, self-inflicted with a blank red paint for blood, a real bullet later to fake severity. You shot Lynette after Jackie drugged her with a cocktail, then staged the J to implicate her. Simon smirked. Prove it, little man. Poirot continued. Jackie, provided the alibi breakdown allowed Simon freedom. He killed Lynette, tossed the gun overboard wrapped in a velvet stole to muffle the splash, but a witness saw Louise, the maid, spied you through the vent, demanding hush money, that scrap of note. You stabbed her with a surgical knife from Bessner's kit. Jacqueline laughed bitterly. Fantasy, Nan, Poirot said. Salome saw Simon discard the stole stained with paint from his fake wound. She confronted him, and Jackie shot her with the silenced pistol hidden in her shawl. Evidence cascaded. The stole recovered from the river, paint traces matching Simon's blood. Louise's note fragment tracing to Simon's wallet. Witnesses placing Jackie near Salome's cabin, not sedated as claimed Bowers, lied, bribed. Why? Rosalie cried. Poirot's voice softened. Love twisted into greed. Simon and Jackie plotted. He wooed Lynette for her wealth, married her, then eliminated her. Jackie stalked to divert suspicion. The honeymoon he related, perfect for the act. But human error, the maid's greed, the novelist's curiosity. Simon lunged, but race restrained him. Jacqueline cornered, drew a hidden derringer, but Poirot. Words halted her. Mademoiselle, end this with dignity. The Nile claims enough souls. She faltered, confessing in tears. We loved desperately, poverty drove us mad. Lynette's money was our escape. As Egyptian police boarded at dawn, handcuffing the pair, the Karnak exhaled. Pennington's fraud exposed incidentally. Tim's sketches revealed as forgerous he was a jewel thief. The missing pearls his doing, but secondary to the murders. Rosalie found solace with Ferguson, their debates blooming into affection. Colonel Race saluted Poirot. Another victory, old friend. Poirot, gazing at the pyramid's eternal silhouette, turned to me. Hastings, the heart's shadows are deeper than any tomb. But justice, like the Nile, endures. As the ship docked in Cairo, farewells mingled with the call to prayer. Poirot retired to his suite, his legacy a constellation of solved enigmas. Further puzzles beckoned. His journey complete, he embraced the quiet wisdom of ages, the crimson waters fading to tranquil gold.